Okay, welcome everyone to today's class where we'll be talking about advanced workflow management under tools for product managers. I know we looked at tools right the last time, but let's just set some things a little bit more in place so we don't get to look back and get panicked or be confused, right? That is why we're having this session today. So let's get right into it. During our last class, right, we learned about how to set up Trello and Linear, right? We talked about boards, we talked about lists and cards and so on. And on Linear, we talked about projects, issues, and basically how to organize them so you can work efficiently. Now, I want you to imagine you've just been hired to manage a big, fast-moving project. Using our examples now, we've been talking about the money transfer app. Now, at first, you might set up a basic Trello board with 3 lists. You have your to-do, you have your doing, and you have the done. Now, that's the standard Kanban starter pack, yes. But here's the problem. Once your team starts growing, or once you have more than one type of work running at the same time, that simple board that you have created somehow becomes confusing. You have different stages like bug fixes, and then it might be next to your feature development. You might have some design tasks that gets mixed up with some back-end tasks, and you have no clue at a glance, right, what to actually look at, right? This is where advanced workflow management comes in. And I want you to remember something. Advanced doesn't mean complicated. Now, for the sake of it, it means your Trello is set up in a way that mirrors the real process that your team follows from the moment you have an idea to the moment that your product is shipped or your product is launched. If you can get your Trello to reflect that particular reality or to mirror that mindset, then you have already won half of your PM battle. By PM, I mean product manager. I'm sure we are familiar with that by now. Now, here's the key thing. Instead of Trello being just a to-do list, you get to turn it into a map, right? A living map of your delivery or of your pipeline. Every single card should become like a small piece of, the bigger picture that you have in mind, so that when you or maybe you or your stakeholders or some other team members looks at the board, they shouldn't just see list of tasks, list of user stories, right? They should see the story of the project, right, displaying in real time. They should be able to look at your board and get an understanding of the project in real time. Now, let's connect this to our money transfer app. Say we're building a schedule future transfer, transfer feature on the basic board, the board that has the to do, doing, and done, right? That might be, one card. You might have just one card sitting in different stages of those board. But in reality, there are so many more steps involved in that feature we are trying to build. You have steps like product review, you have design, you have development, you have Q&A, you have compliance check, and then of course you have release preparation. And if we only have 3 lists, all those other complexity, they get hidden. So what advanced workflow does is that it exposes those other steps that are hidden in the other 3 lists, right? If we know what our processes involve, let's say design, sign off, or development, then our board should have a dedicated stage for all of that. If compliance approval is always a bottleneck, then we get to make it visible with its own stage. If Q&A keeps finding issues late in the sprint, maybe we have a ready for testing, that's Q&A, list somewhere. We need to be able to hand that over to the dev. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that we need to make things visible, right? And when you make it visible, you can manage it very well. You can see where things are stuck. You can see if there's too much work in progress, and you can catch, some risk factor before they turn into emergencies, maybe. And here's the best part. You don't need a paid Trello plan to do this, right? You can still do all of these things with the free version of it. Now, the reality is that as a PM, you don't get extra points for sticking to one tool, right? Now, I know that during the last class, I had shown us how these things work, right? The visual display, but now I just want to add some context to it. You don't get an extra point for just using a particular tool or sticking to one tool. Your goal as a product manager is the outcome, right? The faster you deliver, the clearer you can communicate, and how few, right, of a blocker you have. If that means that some part of your workflow has to live in a different tool, that's perfectly fine. In fact, it is smart for you to do that. And we have some advanced workflow management steps here. And we said the first one is structured execution. Now, this is directed to the Linear app. Structured execution for complex engineering work. Now, Trello is amazing for flexibility. But when we move into heavy engineering work, like adding, based on the app we are building, like adding multi-currency transfers, the structure becomes a bit critical. In Linear, you have projects for the big initiatives, each one with a defined scope, a well-defined timeline, and as we had talked about, right, all of these things are available on Linear. And of course, you have issues that are tightly integrated with engineering needs, statuses, assignee, priority, and of course, you have cycles. Now, cycles that function like auto-managed sprints, right? Where you do not have to do the whole manual list shuffling thing. It just flows on its own. That is why it's called a cycle. If I have, like, let's say 40 back-end and front-end tasks to deliver before a particular release, I can slice them into 2 cycles, attach them to one project. Please take note of this. I'll take that again. If I have, let's say, 40 back-end and front-end tasks to deliver before a particular release, and by release, I mean launch of a product, I can slice them into 2 cycles, right? Each of them, right, I'm going to attach them to one project. And immediately, you can see both progress by cycle and overall project completion. Now, that's harder to do in Trello without, some paid power-ups or external integration. If you remember vividly, we talked about power-ups. So doing this is going to be a little tasky on Trello, but it's actually more convenient if you're using Linear. And then secondly, we have managing dependencies. Last week in Trello, we were manually tagging related cards and noting down dependencies in the description, if you remember. In Linear, this is native. And what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you want to tag implement GBP backend support, right? You can add the blocks, you can add the display of what is supposed to be there. Maybe you want the blocks to display the GBP in UI dropdown. It can do that for you. And you can even add more, maybe enable compliance check, and so on. When you mark an issue as blocked on Linear surfaces it visually and keeps it from moving forward until the dependency is resolved. Now, this prevents a developer from working on something that, literally cannot be completed yet. I hope that makes sense to us. So the third one, we have prioritization beyond labels. In Trello, rather, prioritization is usually handled via labels or via list order or custom field. But in linear, prioritization is part of the system. You can set it, right? You can set it to urgent. If you remember vividly, you can set it to high, medium, low, and so on. So on the screen, you can see it clearly. You have the urgent, right? And the PO there signifies prioritization, right? So you have prioritization 0, which is must fix now, and then you have high, you have medium, and you have low. Now, this makes sprint planning much easier because you can sort by priority instantly without manually dragging cards around like Trello. And we have speed and filtering at scale. When you've got, let's say, 100+ issues, something. Can you guys still hear me? Please give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me. Hello, can you guys hear me? Give me a thumbs
Yes, we
up.
can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And you can see my screen, right? I can just see the chat.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I said when you have like 100+ issues, and that is something we hit in a real product life cycle, Trello starts requiring, careful board design for it to stay stable. While linear is built to handle that scale with, minimal visual clutter. On linear, you can search across all projects instantly if there are plenty, and you can filter by persons. That is, you can filter by assignee, you can filter by status, you can filter by cycle or priority in seconds, and you get what you're looking for. And you can also use keyboard shortcuts, like I had mentioned during the last class, to update multiple issues without even touching your mouse. Now, this isn't just a nice to have, right? At scale, you can call it a productivity multiplier because it is very, very efficient. So we have combining Trello plus Linear in a single PM workflow. Now, for our money transfer app, um, all right. For a money transfer app, a strong advanced setup could look like, let's say, using Trello for discovery. You can use Trello for discovery, product research, design tasks, or some of the stakeholders' requests. And then you can use Linear for engineering execution, Q&A, bug testing and tracking, and some release readiness. When a feature idea in Trello gets scoped out and approved, let's say you have uploaded all of your feature ideas on Trello, the way after your product brief from the client, you now upload all of those scope on Trello and you run it through some of your stakeholders, and then it gets scoped out and approved by them. You, as the PM, can now promote it into linear as a project with some linked issues. Now, this gives you a clean separation. Trello stays as, the flexible collaborative space, while linear becomes the more focused execution space. And we also have the free-only constraints and workarounds, right? Now, we are not trying to pay for premium tools here, right? So we get to work smart. Trello free plan carries 10 boards max, right? 10 boards per workspace. And it also carries 10 manual dependencies and labels for priority. Linear free plan carries unlimited users and issues, but in cycles, right? It's built in cycles, right? And projects and dependencies. I'll take that again. For linear, their free plan carries unlimited users and issues. It has some built-in cycles. It houses projects and it houses dependencies as well. It houses all of these things. Now, how to make this work is by balancing them so that every development tracking lives in linear, where most structures are free, while Trello gets to handle the creative cross-functional work where they are not as much as that of linear. So the main takeaway here is that you don't need to choose between Trello and linear, right? Use each of them or any tool for that matter. What you should do is use each, right, where it is strongest and where it is most needed, and connect them through your process, not through some expensive integrations now. Now, the more you align your team to understand why something lives, let's say in Trello, and why something lives on linear, the less you spend time, chasing updates, and the more you spend time delivering some good real work. So moving on. Now, in our last session, we kind of got comfortable setting up the boards and the list and the cards, and that was on Trello for our money transfer app. But today we want to try to design a workflow. Now, I know that I had walked us through this visually during the last class, but today I just want to lay more emphasis in case of those that found it a bit complicated, right? So this is where many PMs get stuck. They create boards that look very nice, but don't actually drive execution. Our goal today is to make Trello work as hard, as possible for us, even with free limitations. Now, here's a little practical for you. If you have your PC handy right now, I suggest that you open it and follow what I am about to say. With that, you get to learn faster, right? You can open your laptop and just, follow suit. So the first one we have starts with workflow stages. Most people stop at backlog, in progress, and done. That's fine, like I said, for a small project. But in product management, the reality is a bit more complex. For a money transfer app, I might set up backlog. Now, backlog houses all feature ideas. It houses the bug reports and requests, the request that your team are bringing also lives here before they get prioritized, right? Now, the tip to arranging your backlog is to keep it clean, right? Archive some old or unrealistic cards, maybe once every 2 weeks or once every month, right? And then if it's ready for sprint, you need to groom it. You need to make sure it's prioritized and it needs to be ready to be picked up by the next cycle. That is for the ready for sprint board. And then the next one should be the in progress. Now, at this point, work is actively being developed or being designed. right? And then you also have ready for Q&A. What this means is that development at this stage is done, but we need the quality assurance testing, which is the Q&A, right? So you move it from done, development done, to ready for Q&A. Now in Q&A, testing is actively in progress. So when the testers are done, they get to now move it from the Q&A to R&R, which is ready for release. Now, ready for release is, this has fully been tested and is just awaiting deployment. And then it can finally be moved into done. By done, that means this is deployed and confirmed. Now, all of these stages, they really matter, because instead of just knowing, oh, we are working on it, we now know exactly where in the life cycle a particular task is stuck, right? If a bug sits in ready for Q&A for a week, we know that, okay, Q&A is now a bottleneck, or there's something going on. I don't know if you guys are getting my point. Kindly give me a thumbs up. Let me know that we are together. Can you guys hear me? All right, thank you, Chukwuemeka. Okay, thank you. All right, so then the next one, we have stimulating dependencies without paid features. We know Trello is free, right? Trello is free. At least we have the free version of that. But the free version doesn't have the native dependencies management like Linear. But that doesn't mean we can't stimulate it. Now, another way to stimulate your Trello is option 1. You need to stimulate it through label-based dependencies, right? Use a label called block, or blocked rather, in red, right? If a particular feature has been blocked, just put it in red under labels, right? In the card description of that particular label, you need to mention that this has been blocked. Okay, please, somebody just unmute and let me know that you can still see my screen.
Yes, you can see the screen.
You can see it.
Oh, thank you. Now, this creates a clickable reference, right? In the card description, when you mention that, oh, this particular thing has been blocked, and you can probably add the link, because when you add the link, it creates a clickable reference. So option 2, we have a checklist for sub-dependencies. Now, how you do this is you create a checklist called dependencies, and link and other card URLs maybe in the comment section, where people can also click and go see the checklist, right? And those linked cards that you have, those cards that you have added the link to it, can now be moved to done, right? When it moves to done, you can now check them off. Now, example for our app, let's say we want to enable international transfers, right? But that has been blocked, or that has been marked as blocked. Now, add currency selector to the form, right? So that when they are filling form and then they fill an international, they select an international country that has been blocked, it gets bounced, right? Now, you can also update the backend API to handle multiple currencies. Now, this has nothing to do with you. This is more development. So we put those as checklist item with links, so that anyone can see instantly, what is holding all of these tasks back, so that somebody doesn't just come and see that, oh, this task is still in progress for a long time and there is no update. But if the person comes and then it is flagged on red as blocked, now the person can move past it knowing that, okay, this is intentionally here. Now, we have advanced labeling for prioritization. Now, labels aren't just for categories. They can act like a priority system. For Trello, I suggest, using red for priority 0, which indicates, critical or must fix now, something like that. For example, let's say the app crashes when somebody is trying to send money. That is very critical and you must fix it now. So it has to be in red. Red kind of indicates an emergency, right? And then let's say for the high priority, which is P1, you could use the orange color, and that could indicate, let's say somebody wants to add biometrics for login, right? You can use that. That's not an entirely high priority, so you can use orange, right? And then you have maybe use yellow for priority 2, right, which is medium. That medium could mean important but not urgent, right? An example of something that is important but not urgent is let's say you want to improve transaction history UI, right? You want to just do some improvement. That is important, but it's not necessarily urgent because it is not detrimental to your application. And then you have the P3. For P3, I would say that's priority 3. I would say I would say that you use color green, right? And that could mean maybe, let's say, add animations during transfer. That is not really a priority. Animations does not add anything positive to the application, just some visual representation to appease the eyes. And you can also add functional labels like purple for UI UX. You can add blue for backend or pink for compliance. Just play around with the colors, so that when you filter by labels, you can, run a quick virtual, eye scan, right? And you can also run a quick virtual stand-up by maybe telling your team, oh, let's review all red and orange cards first. So you already know what the red and orange indicates, right? You and your team, you know what it indicates. So everybody just goes there without having to read too much, right? And then you have using filters to stay focused. Now, one of the easiest free tricks in Trello is the filter. And how you get to that is the shortcut. You press F. When you're on your Trello board and you press F, this lets you view only tags or cards, right, that are assigned to you. Now, you can view the labels by priority. You can view by due date. For example, as a PM, if I want to check the quality assurance current task or current work, all I have to do is just filter by ready for QA, right? The list and the label, everything that involves QA is going to pop up for me to see them. And we have automating without paid automation. Now, the free plan allows 1 power up per plan. One power up per plan, right? Apologies for that break. Okay, if you choose wisely, you can add significant automation without paying. Now, here are some options, right? Let's say card aging, right? You show cards fading visually if they have been untouched for a long time. Now, this is great for spotting bottlenecks. If a particular card has stayed for a long time and nobody has clicked on it, nobody has moved it, nobody has done anything on it, it fades, right? It visually fades. The color just dims more than the rest of the other cards. So as a PM, you can easily identify that, oh, this particular card hasn't been touched. And then you have the calendar view, right? This lets you see due dates on a calendar. And of course, the custom fields where you add fields like efforts or release version and so on. Since we only get one power up, I recommend, custom fields for most of your PM workflows. It's the closest, we get to adding things like maybe Jira or other platforms. And then we have sprint simulation in free Trello. We can stimulate sprints by creating a sprint backlog list and adding a label for the sprint name. Example, let's say sprint 14 or sprint 20. Moving committed cards from ready for sprint to sprint backlog at the start. And at the end, archive the sprint list and replace it with a fresh sprint, because this is not like linear that the cycle automatically disappears when it is done, right? If you want a visual burn down, you can do this, manually. Add a checklist to the sprint backlog card and tick items daily, but that can be very tedious. Or maybe you could use a Google Sheet to track some completed tasks or some planned tasks, right? So moving on, you have number 7 as, linking Trello with Linear for execution. Now, this is where the advanced PM thinking comes in. We can use Trello for discovery, for design, for stakeholder communication, and we can use Linear for engineering cycles. Now, linked Trello cards to Linear, linking them to the Linear issues in description. How you do that is you get to add some real-time exchange rates to transfer screens, and you can only do this in the paid version, right? To the transfer screen, right? That has the design files, the product rationale, and every other thing. And link Linear issue. Now, technical implementation details plus assigned developer, you can link this as well. This gives us, right, stakeholders in Trello, they get to see without touching the details. They are seeing everything the way it is, but they do not touch, they cannot click. Now, engineers in Linear, they stay focused without, constant bulk of what's the status, what are we doing, and so on. And then we have continuous backlog refinement. In Trello, this means, reviewing labels for accuracy, removing stale or irrelevant card, splitting overly large cards into smaller deliverables, and so on. Now, this is something you should schedule every 2 weeks so your board stays lean and useful. So what this workflow actually achieves, right, is that if you follow this setup, you can track exactly where each feature or each bug is without paying for some premium tools. It saves you money. Your backlog also gets to stay organized and doesn't overwhelm your team. You can handle dependencies, priorities, and sprints in a visual collaborative way as well. You can also maintain separation between stakeholder-friendly spaces, which is Trello, and execution-focused spaces, which is Linear. I hope that makes sense to us. So moving on, I don't know, but I feel the need to talk a little bit about cycles on Linear, just for clarity, maybe. In Linear, cycles are one of the most effective ways to bring structure and predictability to your team's work. A cycle is essentially a fixed time. This is for those of us that did not get the explanation during the last class. A cycle is essentially a fixed time box, right? Usually 1 or 2 weeks long, during which the team commits to delivering a specific set of work items. Now think of it as Linear's built-in version of an agile sprint, but with more automation and fewer manual setups. The difference from Trello is that you don't need to create sprints, right? Or list or move cards around to track the progress. Linear automatically sets start and end dates. It tracks the completion and gives you real-time metrics, right? Gives you a real-time metrics like burn down charts and progress bar. For example, in a money transfer app project, a 2-week cycle might be dedicated to releasing the, let's say, the multi-currency transfer feature, which could involve finalizing currency conversion display, fixing transfer delay bugs, and implementing maybe localization for non-English speakers, right? The planning stage of a cycle is now where a product manager's role is most critical. Before the cycle begins, you review the backlog. You get to prioritize items based on business value, based on urgency, and also based on dependencies. And you need to confirm the team's capacity for that given time frame. You also need to identify and resolve potential blockers ahead of time. For instance, ensuring compliance approval is secure before starting development. Once the cycle begins, the scope is meant to be fixed, which helps the team stay focused while linear. Sorry. Please give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me. Okay. So while linear does allow you to add new items in the middle of the cycle, it will flag this as scope changes. So you and the team are aware of the potential impact on delivery. So that is why before you start, it is good to go through your backlogs and all of that. Now, this helps protect against the common pitfall of, constant reprioritization, which can derail your progress. You don't always have to add to your cycles rather. You don't always have to add. Once you have started your cycle, you allow it to, run through. Now, during the cycle itself, your focus gets to shift from planning to execution and to monitoring, right? You use linear's visual progress, like you can see on the screen, right? The visual progress indicator to see how close the team is to completing the planned scope. And you step in to remove any blockers as quickly as possible, like maybe connecting a developer with the design team to clarify a UI detail, or maybe chasing an external partner for required API documentation. And at the end of the cycle, linear automatically summarizes, right? Summarizes what was completed, what was carried over, and why that was carried over. Now, this makes your retrospective more productive because you're working from concrete data, not just from your memory muscle. And over time, running consistent cycles in linear gives your team a predictable rhythm. It allows stakeholders to trust delivery timelines and creates historical performance data you can use to improve planning and accuracy. Now, we have some prioritization strategies for PM, right? Prioritization is one of the most important skills for a product manager because no team has unlimited time. People or resources, you don't have unlimited time, you don't have unlimited resources or unlimited people. In practice, prioritization is about deciding what your team will focus on now, what can wait and what should be, removed entirely from your scope. The challenge is that almost every stakeholder will see their request as urgent and valuable. I know that, I understand that. Now, your role as a product manager is to filter those requests and organize them in a way that delivers the highest possible impact within the constraints of your team. Now, tools like Trello and Linear can help, but the thinking must come from you. For example, in our money transfer app, we might have requests, ranging from adding biometrics, logging to fixing a rare transaction bug, or even expanding into new markets. Now, all of this sounds important, but not all have equal urgency or value in the current business context. One effective approach is to use, prioritization frameworks, even in the free versions of tools. We have the Moscow method. Remember, we talked about the must have, the should have, the could have, and the won't have, right? This Moscow method helps you clarify tasks based on necessity. And you can use the RISE approach, which is the reach, impact, confidence, and effort. This is another method where you assign score to tasks. We're going to talk about it in more details in our next class. This is where you assign scores to each task, based on how many users, they affect, the value they bring, your certainty in the benefits, and the effort required. In Linear, you can stimulate all of these framework by tagging and sorting issues. While in Trello, you might use labels or custom fields to maybe indicate priority. Let's say your analysis shows that fixing the transaction delay bug has a high reach or a high impact and low effort. It will naturally, go to the top of the queue for the next cycle or the next sprint. Meanwhile, the biometric login feature, while this is very valuable, it might score, lower on the list of urgency, and therefore it's going to be scheduled for a future cycle, not an immediate one. Now, the key to prioritization is not just deciding what work to do or what to work on, but communicating, that reasoning clearly to your team and to your stakeholders. When people understand why one task is chosen over the other, they are more likely to align with the plan. And this is where documentation features in both Trello and Linear can come in handy and helpful. In Trello, you might have a prioritized backlog, a prioritized backlog list that, always reflects the next set of high value items. In Linear, you might, use a dedicated view, right, filtered by priority or by tags. In either case, the visual order, of works makes it easy for anyone joining the project to understand that to understand what is most important, at the moment. This level of transparency also reduces the amount of time you spend in alignment meetings, right, or your general weekly meetings, because the priorities are visible and constantly being updated. Finally, remember that prioritization is not a one-time activity. It's an ongoing process that requires flexibility and frequent reassessment. Business conditions, they change, right? And sometimes you might require to also change your strategy. User feedback can reveal unexpected problems, and technical discoveries can change your timelines. In our money transfer app, for example, a sudden what's going on? All right, so a sudden, let's say maybe a sudden regulatory change in a target market could instantly push compliance related work to the top of the list, even if it wasn't, previously considered as urgent. As a PM, your job is to reevaluate, readjust, and ensure that the team is always working on the most impactful set of tasks at every moment. Both Trello and Linear, they allow you to reorder tasks. So just adjust the due dates and reassign responsibilities quickly, which makes them ideal for maintaining an agile and responsive workflow. Okay, so I think we are going to take a pause here for the day, and I am going to take questions. Do we have any questions? Any questions? We have come to the end of today's class. Do we have any questions? You know how we do it. Raise your hand if you have a question. Umilayo, you have a question. Go ahead. You can hear me. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm a bit. I do not really understand most of the lecture today because the last lecture I stopped was that, and I'm trying to meet up.
I can't hear you clearly, Umilayo.
Okay. And you?
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, your voice was a bit muffled.
Okay, I said the last video I stopped was at part 4. So I'm trying to meet up. And because there's class today, I have to join. But based on lecture today, seems like I will need laptop to understand most of the practical aspect of the work, right?
Okay, are you asking me or you're making a statement?
Did you understand what I said?
Are you asking if you need a laptop to be able to understand what we're talking about?
What do you say, ma'am?
Are you asking me if you need a laptop to be able to understand what we have been talking about? Hello?
Yes,
Can
yes.
anyone else hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right, Fumila, I'm asking if you want to find out from me if you need a laptop.
Yes, from you.
Okay, so my answer would be yes. Now, in as much as you can access these applications on your phone, but there are a lot of other things that you would need a larger screen for, and that is where your laptop comes in, right? So yes, you need a laptop.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Do we have any other question? Okay, I would actually encourage us to ask questions, but that's fine. You can always drop your questions on the channel and tag me if you maybe go back to the video and then you have a question. Let me quickly stop the recording.